Today, we're digging into a story that starts with a simple trade headline, but believe me, it spirals out into a much bigger picture of how our global economy might actually be wired.
It all kicks off with this number, 250%. Now that's a huge number. It's the size of a proposed tariff on all pharmaceutical products coming out of India. And what's really got people talking is the timing. This was announced right around the same time that a 90-day tariff was given to China. So you can see why that raises some eyebrows.
So that leads to the big question, right? Is this just your run-of-the-mill trade spat? Or is it the very first domino to tip over in a much bigger game being played on the world stage?
All right, let's get right into it. First up, we need to look at what's happening on the surface, this idea of a war on medicine. So the core argument here, it boils down to what some are calling straight-up hypocrisy. Here's the thinking. The U.S. is putting all this pressure on India about buying Russian oil. But at the same time, the West itself has been buying refined Russian crude from India and China, and get this, often paying a premium for it. So the conclusion some people are drawing is that this isn't really about policy or principles. It's about using leverage for strategic reasons.
But wait a minute. How on earth does a threat about medicine connect to these huge global power plays? Well, to get that, we have to peel back a layer and look at the engine that runs the entire global economy.
And that brings us to the hidden power of the dollar. This is where we get into an idea that completely reframes globalization. Not as this friendly partnership, but as a sophisticated system of control.
The concept is known as dollar hegemony. And the idea is pretty straightforward, but powerful. When the whole world uses one country's currency for trade, in this case the US dollar, the country that prints that money gets an incredible amount of power. It can, in effect, pay for its own lifestyle simply by exporting inflation to everyone else, to every other country that has to have those dollars to trade and to survive.
And this chart really lays out the argument that this isn't some new phenomenon, but more like colonialism 2.0. Instead of direct political control with soldiers and officials on the ground, this modern version works through finance. The tools aren't armies, they're debt and sanctions. And it's not ruled by governors, but by global financial institutions.
So what's the end result of all this? Well, the argument is that developing nations get stuck on this treadmill, always needing to earn more and more dollars. Meanwhile, the dominant nation can just print more money whenever it needs to. This money then funds its military, its tech, its whole way of life. And the flip side is that this very system, it's argued, has been holding back innovation and growth in other places for decades.
Okay, so how does this play out in the real world? This brings us to how geopolitics, from this viewpoint, is played less like a diplomatic chess match and more like a cutthroat business. It's been described as a two-bucket strategy, and it's a pretty stark way of looking at foreign policy. The idea is that cash flow determines everything. As you can see here, you have two targets, allies and rivals. Allies get the good stuff, dollars and weapons. Rivals get the stick, sanctions, and political pressure. And there's even a historical example pointed to, from 1954 to 1971, where Pakistan supposedly received $2 billion in American weapons, while India was shut out from getting key defense tech.
And this line of thinking goes even deeper. It suggests that a lot of the border conflicts we see aren't just simple fights between two neighbors. The real story, it's argued, might be a third party pulling the strings, funding the whole operation from behind the scenes. So the real conflict isn't just about land or ideology, it's driven by the flow of dollars.
All right, so now we're going to connect this huge, high-level geopolitical game to something incredibly personal, your health and your wallet.
Just look at this. What we're seeing is this massive wave of foreign private equity firms buying up huge controlling stakes in hospital chains in places like India. And you can see some of the big names right here. We're talking about giants like KKR and TPG, and even international pension plans.
And this is set to kick off a really dangerous cycle. Here's how it's supposed to work. First, that foreign money comes in, and it demands massive returns on its investment. So second, the hospitals have to shift their focus from patient care to pure profit. Third, this leads to a rise in things like unnecessary treatments and crazy inflated bills. Fourth, the patients, now victims of the system, start demanding that the government step in and provide free care. And finally, number 5, The government ends up paying those exact same hospitals for that care using our tax money. It's a closed loop.
And this leads to what's described as the ultimate paradox. You have this system of extreme profit-driven capitalism that creates victims, who then turn around and demand something that looks a lot like communism, or at least state-run solutions. And according to this viewpoint, the very same entities are set up to profit from both sides of that equation. It's a win-win for them, no matter what.
So, if this whole system is really being stretched to its breaking point, what happens next? What are the consequences? This leads us to the idea of a global reset.
Now, this is where a bunch of seemingly random, disconnected headlines start to look like puzzle pieces. We're told to consider things like tech billionaires building escape bunkers, Wall Street investors snapping up private prisons, entrepreneurs trying to launch new, privately run territories, lab-grown food getting the green light for mass consumption, and then these attacks on successful immigrants in the West. Are these all just isolated events? Or, as some suggest, are they signs the people in the know are getting ready for a massive fundamental shift?
And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling thought. A system built on endless printing must eventually face a reset. The only question is what comes after. It really forces you to wonder about the stability of the entire global financial system and what its future means for every single one of us.